And I'm Clara, 32, a tattoo artist living in Portland. My skin tells stories through vibrant designs, each one meaningful, each one a piece of my soul. My sister Heather always cringed at my ink, but I never thought it would come to this. When I lost my apartment to a fire, she opened her home to me. I thought blood was thicker than judgment. I was wrong. In one explosive moment, my own sister threw me out because of my tattoos. And that was just the beginning of our story. If you're watching this, take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to connect with all of you who've faced family judgment. Growing up in suburban Chicago, Heather and I were as different as two sisters could be, while still sharing the same parents. 4 years older than me, Heather was always the perfect daughter. Straight A's perfect attendance president of every club she joined. I was more free-spirited, drawn to art and self-expression from an early age. Our differences became more pronounced after our parents divorced when I was 10 and Heather was 14. The divorce hit our family hard. Dad moved across town and suddenly our stable middle-class life felt fractured. Heather responded by becoming even more structured and traditional, as if perfection could somehow fix our broken family. I went the opposite direction, finding comfort in creativity and artistic expression. Even then, I was covering my school notebooks with drawings, while Heather was organizing her college application strategy. After high school, we took completely different paths. Heather followed the traditional route. She attended Northwestern University, married Richard, her college sweetheart, who became a banking executive and settled in the Chicago suburbs with their 3 children, Emma, 15, Tyler, 13, and Jackson, 10. She created the picture-perfect family she had always wanted. I took a different journey. After a year at community college, I realized the traditional education path wasn't for me. I apprenticed with a tattoo artist in Chicago before moving to Portland to build my career. Over the past decade, I've established myself as a respected tattoo artist, with a unique style blending watercolor techniques with geometric precision. My work has been featured in tattoo magazines, and I've even guest spotted at shops across the country. Despite our different lifestyles, Heather and I maintained a relatively good relationship. We had the occasional disagreement about my career choice or appearance, but we generally respected each other's life decisions. I made sure to visit Chicago at least twice a year to see my niece and nephews, and Heather would occasionally bring the kids to Portland for a brief visit. The real test of our relationship came 3 months ago. A fire broke out in my apartment building, destroying most of my belongings. Insurance would cover the losses eventually, but I was essentially homeless. When Heather heard about my situation, she immediately offered her guest room. "Stay as long as you need," she said during our phone call. "We have plenty of space, and the kids would love to see their Aunt Clara." I was genuinely touched by her generosity. Despite our differences, she was there when I needed her most. I gratefully accepted, packed my remaining belongings, and flew to Chicago the next day. Upon arrival, Heather and the entire family welcomed me warmly. Richard helped carry my bags to the guest room, and the kids were excited to have their cool aunt staying with them. Their suburban home was spacious, a far cry from my Portland apartment, with 4 bedrooms, a manicured lawn, and a finished basement. "I know this isn't your usual style," Heather said, as she showed me to the guest room, "but I hope you'll be comfortable here." The guest room was painfully neutral. Beige walls, white bedding, generic landscapes on the walls, but it was clean and comfortable. I was grateful to have a safe place to stay while I figured out my next steps. I promised to help with household expenses and the kids while I was there. This wasn't just about taking advantage of free lodging. I wanted to contribute to the household that had welcomed me in my time of need. "I insist on paying my share," I told Heather, "and I'm happy to help with the kids whenever you need me." What Heather didn't know was that I had been putting aside money for her children's education for years. Despite my less conventional career path, I'd been relatively successful, and I wanted to make sure my niece and nephews had opportunities. I had saved nearly $30,000, specifically earmarked for their college funds. I hadn't told Heather about this yet. I was waiting for the right moment, perhaps around the holidays. During those first few weeks, I was careful to be the perfect house guest. I kept my area tidy, helped with cooking and cleaning, and tried to adapt to their family routines. I made a genuine effort to bond with Emma, Tyler, and Jackson, finding ways to connect with each of them. I thought everything was going well, but beneath the surface, tensions were building that would eventually explode in ways I never could have anticipated. My first few weeks at Heather's house were surprisingly pleasant. I made a conscious effort to fit into their family routine while still being the fun aunt the kids had always known. Emma, Tyler, and Jackson were fascinated by my tattoos and the stories behind them. They'd never had the chance to spend so much extended time with me before. Emma at 15 was at that age where she was figuring out who she wanted to be. She had her mother's organizational skills, but seemed to have inherited some of my creative tendencies as well. She was taking art classes at school and showed real promise. "Aunt Clara, could you teach me how to draw better?" she asked one afternoon while we were sitting in the backyard. "I want to get better at shading and perspective." "Of course," I replied, genuinely happy to share my artistic knowledge. We spent the afternoon with sketchbooks, and I showed her some basic techniques. Her natural talent surprised me. She picked up concepts quickly and had a good eye for detail. Tyler was 13 and in that awkward phase where he was trying to establish his own identity. He was particularly interested in the meanings behind my tattoos and the technical aspects of how they were created. "How much does it hurt?" he asked, examining the intricate sleeve on my right arm. "And how do you come up with the designs?" I explained the process honestly, but age-appropriately, describing how different areas of the body have different sensitivity levels and how I collaborate with clients to create meaningful designs. Even 10-year-old Jackson was curious, though, in a more innocent way. He loved the colourful Japanese-inspired koi fish swimming up my left forearm and made up stories about their adventures. I noticed Heather watching these interactions with a mixture of emotions playing across her face. While she seemed pleased that I was bonding with her children, there was a subtle tension in her expression whenever the kids showed too much interest in my tattoos. The first minor incident occurred about 2 weeks into my stay. I came downstairs to find Emma drawing at the kitchen table. She was sketching a design that incorporated elements inspired by some of my tattoos. It wasn't anything inappropriate, just a creative exploration of patterns and symbols. Heather walked in, glanced at Emma's drawing, and frowned slightly. "Emma, don't you have math homework to finish?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of disapproval. "I already finished it, Mom," Emma replied without looking up from her sketch. "Aunt Clara showed me some cool design techniques and I'm practicing." "Well, I think you should focus more on your core subjects," Heather said, shooting me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Art is fine as a hobby, but it's not something to get too invested in." I bit my tongue, not wanting to contradict Heather's parenting in front of Emma. But later that evening, I overheard Heather talking to Richard in their bedroom. Their door was ajar, and I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but Heather's words carried into the hallway. "I'm worried Clara might be a bad influence on the kids," she said, her voice low but intense. Emma's suddenly talking about artistic expression and individuality instead of focusing on her college prep activities. "She'll be fine," Richard replied, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "It's probably just the novelty of having Clara around. It'll wear off." I quietly retreated to my room, hurt by Heather's words, but determined to respect her boundaries. After all, they were her children, and I was a guest in their home. I decided to be more mindful of how I interacted with the kids, without changing who I fundamentally was. As the days passed, I noticed Richard becoming increasingly distant. Initially, he had been welcoming and friendly, but now he barely made eye contact during our limited interactions. The atmosphere in the house grew more tense, with Heather making subtle comments about appropriate influences and setting good examples. Despite the growing tension, I found a temporary position at a local tattoo shop to generate income while I was in Chicago. I made sure to contribute to household expenses, buying groceries, and giving Heather money for utilities. I wanted her to know I wasn't taking advantage of their hospitality. The tension came to a head during a family dinner about a month after I arrived. We were eating Heather's famous lasagna when Tyler innocently mentioned something that clearly touched a nerve. "When I turn 18, he announced between bites, "I think I want to get a tattoo like Aunt Clara's phoenix on my shoulder." The table went silent. Heather's fork froze halfway to her mouth and Richard's expression darkened. I quickly tried to diffuse the situation. "That's a long way off, buddy," I said lightly. "You'll probably change your mind a dozen times before then. And remember, good tattoos require a lot of thought and planning." "There will be no tattoos in this family," Heather said firmly, placing her fork down with a bit more force than necessary. "Tyler, we've discussed this. They're permanent marks that limit your future opportunities." "But Aunt Clara has tattoos and she's successful," Tyler argued. "That's enough," Richard interjected. "Your aunt made certain life choices that we don't necessarily agree with. Let's change the subject." The remainder of the dinner was uncomfortably silent, with only Jackson's oblivious chatter filling the void. Later that week, I accidentally discovered that Heather and Richard were planning an expensive European vacation for the summer. I overheard them discussing itineraries for London, Paris, and Rome. a 3-week trip that would cost thousands of dollars. I wasn't judging their spending habits, but it struck me as an interesting priority for a family that had just criticized my career choices. A few days after that discovery, Heather approached me with what seemed like an innocent request. "Clara, we're planning a family trip to Europe this summer," she said casually. "Would you be willing to house sit while we're gone? It would be for about 3 weeks in July." "Sure," I replied, happy to help. "I'll probably be back in Portland by then, but I could fly back to watch the house." "That would be wonderful," Heather said, visibly relieved. "We really don't trust anyone else with the house for that long." Little did I know that this agreement would later become a significant point of contention between us. The real trouble began after I got a new tattoo. My friend Samantha back in Portland had passed away unexpectedly from cancer, and I wanted something to remember her by. I visited the Chicago shop where I'd been picking up shifts and had a small watercolor hummingbird tattooed on my inner wrist. Samantha had loved hummingbirds, and the design incorporated her favorite colors. When I returned to Heather's house that evening, Emma noticed the fresh tattoo immediately. The plastic wrap was still on it, protecting the new ink. "Aunt Clara, you got a new tattoo," she exclaimed, leaning in to examine it. "It's beautiful. What does it mean?" I explained about Samantha and the significance of the hummingbird while carefully removing the protective covering to show her the design. "It's a way of keeping her memory with me," I explained. "Whenever I see this little bird, I'll think of her." Emma seemed genuinely moved by the sentiment. "That's really special. I like that tattoos can tell stories and keep memories alive." I didn't notice Heather standing in the doorway until she cleared her throat loudly. Her expression was tight lips pressed into a thin line. "Emma, please go set the table for dinner," she said, her voice strained with forced politeness. After Emma left, Heather turned to me. "Could we talk in private?" I followed her to the guest room, already sensing what was coming. Once the door closed behind us, Heather's polite mask fell away. "Clara, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll understand where I'm coming from." She began, her arms crossed defensively. "Would you mind wearing long sleeves when you're around the kids, at least while you're staying with us?" I was stunned. "What? Why?" "The kids are very impressionable," Heather explained, as if talking to a child. "Emma is already asking about tattoos, and now Tyler is talking about getting one when he's older. I don't want them thinking that permanently marking your body is a normal thing to do." The phrase "normal thing to do" stung more than I wanted to admit. My tattoos were meaningful expressions of my life journey, not some rebellious phase or attempt to be edgy. "Heather, it's spring. It's getting warmer. You want me to wear long sleeves all the time?" I asked, trying to keep my tone reasonable. "Just around the kid," she insisted. "Is that really so much to ask?" "You're living in our house, Clara. We have certain values we're trying to instill in our children." Despite feeling deeply hurt, I agreed to try to be more mindful about covering up. I didn't want to create conflict in a home that had taken me in during my time of need. But the request signaled a fundamental shift in our relationship. My sister was essentially asking me to hide who I was. Over the next few days, Heather's comments about my appearance became more frequent and less subtle. When I wore a tank top on a particularly hot day, she remarked, "Don't you have anything with more coverage?" When Emma complimented one of my tattoos, Heather quickly changed the subject. Richard fully supported Heather's position. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen while I was making tea. "Clara, I think you should be more considerate of Heather's feelings," he said in that condescending tone that always made my skin crawl. "She's allowed you to stay here rent-free, and all she's asking is that you respect her parenting decisions." "I am paying my share," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. "And I've been helping with the kids and household chores. I'm not trying to undermine her parenting, but asking me to hide who I am feels like she's ashamed of me." "Don't be so dramatic," Richard scoffed. "It's not about shame. It's about appropriate influences. These are formative years for the kids." I tried multiple times to have a reasonable conversation with Heather about mutual respect and acceptance. I suggested that this could be a valuable opportunity to teach the kids about diversity and accepting people who make different choices. Isn't it better for them to learn that people can look different and make different choices, but still be good people? I asked during one of our calmer discussions. "That's fine in theory," Heather replied dismissively. "But as their mother, I get to decide what values they're exposed to and when. Right now, I don't want them thinking tattoos are a good idea." The tension in the house continued to build. I felt increasingly judged and unwelcome in what was supposed to be a safe space. The kids noticed the change in atmosphere with Emma asking me directly if everything was okay between her mom and me. One afternoon, I overheard Heather on the phone with her friend Lisa, not realizing I was within earshot. "The tattoo situation is becoming a real problem," she said in a hushed voice. "The kids are fascinated by them, and Clara makes no effort to downplay it. Emma's talking about getting one when she's 18 now. I don't know how much longer this arrangement can work." The final straw came when I found Heather in the bathroom scrubbing at Jackson's arm while he cried. He had drawn what looked like a colourful dragon on his forearm, with markers clearly inspired by one of my tattoos. "Mum, stop, it hurts," Jackson protested as Heather scrubbed his skin red with a washcloth. "This is exactly what I was worried about," Heather snapped when she saw me in the doorway. "He's drawing tattoos on himself now. This is your influence." "Heather, it's just marker," I said, trying to diffuse the situation. "Kids draw on themselves all the time. It's normal." "There's nothing normal about this family's sudden obsession with tattoos," she retorted. "Everything was fine before you came." As Jackson continued to cry, I realized that my sister fundamentally disapproved of who I was as a person. No amount of compromise or conversation was going to change that. The realization was both painful and liberating. I couldn't make Heather accept me, but I also didn't have to diminish myself to please her. The explosion that had been building for weeks finally happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the kitchen with Emma looking through a photography book that showcased various styles of tattoo art around the world. It was educational and artistic, nothing inappropriate for a 15-year-old. "These Japanese-style sleeves are amazing," Emma said, pointing to a page featuring traditional Irezumi designs. "The way they tell entire stories through imagery is so cool." "That's what drew me to that style for some of my work," I explained. "Each element has meaning and works together to create a larger narrative." Emma looked thoughtful for a moment, then asked the question that would ignite everything. "Aunt Clara, do you think you could help me design something for when I turn 18? Nothing big, just something meaningful for my first tattoo." Before I could answer, Heather's voice cut through the room like ice. "Absolutely not." I hadn't heard her enter the kitchen, but she stood in the doorway, face flushed with anger. Emma jumped slightly at her mother's tone. "Mum, I'm not getting one now," Emma explained. "I'm just thinking about the future, when I'm an adult." "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen," Heather said, ignoring Emma and staring directly at me. 3 months of your influence, and now my daughter is planning to mark herself permanently." "Heather," I said calmly, "we were just having a conversation. Emma's showing interest in art and self-expression, which are positive things." "Don't tell me what's positive for my child," Heather snapped. "Emma, go to your room. I need to speak with your aunt." "But Mum..." "Now Emma." Emma shot me an apologetic look before leaving the kitchen. Once she was gone, Heather unleashed the full force of her resentment. "How dare you encourage my daughter to mutilate her body," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you, taking you in when you had nowhere else to go. This is how you repay us, by corrupting my children." The accusation stung. "I wasn't encouraging anything, Heather. We were looking at a book of art. And frankly, I find the term mutilate deeply offensive." "Call it whatever you want," she retorted. "Those things all over your body are a sign of poor decision-making and a lack of foresight. Is that really what you want to teach my kids?" "What I want to teach them is that people can make different choices and still deserve respect," I replied, working hard to keep my voice steady, "that appearances don't define a person's worth or character." "That's rich coming from someone who's turned herself into a walking billboard," Heather scoffed. Richard, attracted by the raised voices, entered the kitchen. "What's going on?" "Your sister-in-law is trying to convince Emma to get tattoos," Heather said before I could speak. "That's not what happened," I objected. "We were looking at a book about tattoo art, and Emma asked a question. I didn't suggest anything." Richard looked between us, then predictably sided with his wife. "Clara, we've been patient, but you need to understand that you're a guest in our home. If Heather isn't comfortable with you discussing tattoos with our children, then you need to respect that. I've been bending over backward to respect your rules," I said, frustration mounting. "I've been wearing long sleeves in 80-degree weather. I've been contributing financially and helping around the house. But I won't apologize for who I am or pretend that my life choices are shameful." "No one's asking you to be ashamed," Heather said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We're asking you to be considerate of the fact that you're not a good role model for impressionable children." That was the breaking point. Not a good role model because I have tattoos. Not because I'm unkind or dishonest or cruel, but because I have art on my skin. Let's be real, Clara, Richard interjected. It's not just the tattoos, it's the whole lifestyle. The instability, the unconventional career choice. Maybe it's time you grew up and got a real job. I looked at him in disbelief. A real job, I own a successful business. I support myself completely. I've even been saving money for your children's education. How dare you speak to me like I'm some kind of failure? Heather looked momentarily surprised at the mention of savings for her children, but quickly recovered her righteous anger. If you can't respect our values in our home, then maybe this arrangement isn't working out. What exactly are you saying? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay, she said coldly. Clearly, our parenting styles and values are too different for this to work. I stood there stunned by the finality in her voice. You're kicking me out because of my tattoos. I'm asking you to leave because you refuse to respect our boundaries regarding our children, Heather clarified, as if the distinction mattered. I want you out by Monday. Monday? That's less than 48 hours, I protested. Where am I supposed to go? That's not our problem, Richard said dismissively. You're resourceful. I'm sure you'll figure something out. The cruelty of their ultimatum hit me like a physical blow. My own sister, my flesh and blood, was throwing me out with nowhere to go because she was ashamed of my appearance. Because she didn't want her children thinking tattoos are normal. Fine, I said finally, a strange calm replacing my initial shock. I'll be gone by Monday. But Heather, you should know something. Once I walk out that door, our relationship will never be the same. You can't throw someone away and expect them to come running back when it's convenient for you. Don't be dramatic, Heather said, though I detected a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. This is about what's best for my children. No, I replied. This is about your judgment and your inability to accept anyone who doesn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable, including your own sister. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, head held high despite the tears threatening to spill. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it grew a steely determination. If Heather couldn't accept me for who I was, then perhaps it was time to reconsider what I owed her and her family. I spent the rest of that day packing my belongings, working mechanically through the shock and hurt. Each item I placed in my suitcase felt like a physical reminder of my sister's rejection. The guest room that had been my sanctuary for the past 3 months now felt like a cell I couldn't escape quickly enough. The kids sensed something was wrong. Emma knocked on my door that evening, her face concerned when she saw my half-packed suitcases. Aunt Clara, are you leaving? She asked, her voice small. I didn't want to lie to her, but I also didn't want to turn her against her mother. Yes, honey. It's time for me to find my own place. But why so suddenly? Is it because of what happened earlier? Because of me asking about tattoos? No, Emma, absolutely not. I assured her, sitting down on the bed and patting the space beside me. Your mum and I have different views on some things, and we've decided it might be better if I have my own space. Emma's eyes filled with tears. But I don't want you to go. You're the only one who gets me. Mom just wants me to be like her, but I'm not. I hugged her tightly, fighting back my own tears. You don't have to be like anyone else, Emma. Just be you. That's more than enough. And this isn't goodbye forever. I'll still be around. I didn't know if that last part was true, but I couldn't bear to see her so upset. Tyler and Jackson also came to see me confused and sad about my sudden departure. Jackson brought me one of his stuffed animals. You can take Brownie with you so you won't be lonely, he said, offering his beloved teddy bear. I thanked him, but gently explained that Brownie would miss him too much. Instead, I gave each of the kids small mementos, a sketchbook for Emma, a book about mythology for Tyler, who loved those stories, and a small toy car for Jackson that I had picked up at a local store. That night, I called my co-worker from the Chicago tattoo shop, Mia, and explained my situation. Without hesitation, she offered me her spare room until I figured out my next steps. Stay as long as you need, she said. No judgment in my house, I promise. The next morning, I ordered a rideshare to take me to Mia's place. I left early, hoping to avoid a final confrontation with Heather and Richard. I wrote a short note thanking them for their hospitality and left it on the kitchen counter. Despite everything, I didn't want to be ungrateful for the roof they had provided when I needed it. As the car pulled away from Heather's perfect suburban house, I felt a mixture of sadness, anger, and, surprisingly, relief. The constant pressure to conform to hide who I was had been exhausting. At Mia's, at least, I could be myself without apology. Over the next few days, as I settled into Mia's spare room and planned my next steps, my hurt began to crystallize into something harder, more resolute. I thought about the college fund I had been building for Heather's children, nearly $30,000, that I had set aside from my earnings over the years. Money I had saved while living in a small apartment, taking extra clients and foregoing vacations. Money I had saved for children whose mother considered me a bad influence. I also remembered the European vacation Heather and Richard were planning, an extravagant trip they could apparently afford while simultaneously looking down on my career choices. And they still expected me to house sit for them even after kicking me out. After a week of reflection, I made a decision that would irrevocably change my relationship with my sister. I went to the bank and withdrew all the money from the children's college fund. It was in my name anyway. I had planned to formally gift it to them when they were ready for college. That same day, I received a text from Heather, just confirming you'll still be house-sitting July 7th, 28 for our Europe trip. We'll need to give you the new security code since we've changed it. The audacity was breathtaking. After throwing me out with barely 2 days' notice, she still expected me to drop everything and watch her house for 3 weeks. I waited a full day before responding a simple, "No, I won't be available." Her response came immediately. "What do you mean not available? We already bought non-refundable tickets. You promised." I didn't reply. Let her deal with the consequences of her actions for once. The next day, I used some of the money to secure a small apartment in Chicago. I had decided to stay in the city a bit longer to save up more before returning to Portland and rebuilding my life there. The tattoo shop had offered me more regular hours, appreciating my experience and client management skills. Another text from Heather arrived. "Clara, this is ridiculous. You can't back out now. We're counting on you. The tickets were expensive." This time I responded, "You should have thought about that before kicking me out of your house for existing in a way you don't approve of. I'm no longer available to house sit. You'll need to make other arrangements." Her next message was predictably outraged. "After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us by leaving us in the lurch." I turned off my phone, no longer interested in her manipulative tactics. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I was putting myself first. And it felt right. 3 days later, Heather showed up at the tattoo shop where I worked. I was in the middle of a consultation with a client when I saw her through the front window, her face a mask of righteous indignation as she pushed through the door. "I need to speak with my sister," she announced to the receptionist, who gave me a questioning look. I apologized to my client and stepped into the lobby. "Heather, I'm working. What are you doing here?" "We need to talk. Now." Her voice carried through the shop, causing several clients and artists to look our way. "I'm with a client," I replied calmly. "You can wait or come back later." "This can't wait," she insisted. "You're ruining our family vacation with your pettiness." Reluctantly, I asked my client for 5 minutes and stepped outside with Heather. The spring air was warm, a stark contrast to the chill emanating from my sister. "You need to reconsider house-sitting," she said without preamble. "We can't find anyone else on such short notice and the trip is paid for." "I'm sorry, but no," I replied firmly. "I've made other commitments." "What commitments?" she scoffed. "It's not like you have a real job or responsibilities." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that her opinion of my life no longer mattered. "My work is as real as any other Heather. And after you kicked me out of your house, you lost the right to make demands on my time." "You're being vindictive," she accused. "This isn't like you, Clara. If you don't agree to house sit, I'll tell Mom and Dad how selfish you're being." The threat was so childish that I almost laughed. "Go ahead. I'm not ashamed of setting boundaries with people who don't respect me." Heather's expression shifted, becoming calculating. "What would it take? We can pay you." "It's not about money," I replied. "It's about respect." "Fine," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling Mom right now." As she dialed, I decided it was time for complete honesty. "By the way, I've withdrawn the college fund I was saving for your kids." Her finger froze over the screen. "What college fund?" "The $30,000 I've been saving for Emma, Tyler, and Jackson's education," I explained. "I've been putting money aside for years, planning to give it to them when they were ready for college. But since I'm such a bad influence, I figure my money probably carries the same taint." Heather's face drained of color. "You're lying. There's no way you saved that much." "Believe what you want." I shrugged. "But the money that was in that account is now in mine. I'm using it to rebuild my life after being thrown out of my sister's house for having tattoos. That money was for my children." She exploded, her voice drawing stares from passers-by. "You can't just take it. Actually, I can. It was always my money in my name. I was saving it as a gift for them, but gifts are voluntary. I met her gaze steadily. You made it clear that you don't want your children influenced by someone like me. That extends to my money too. This is theft, she hissed. No, Heather, this is consequence, I corrected her. You can't reject someone while still expecting to benefit from their generosity. Life doesn't work that way. You've changed, she said, as if this was the worst accusation she could level. Yes, I agreed. I've finally realized that I deserve to be treated with respect, even by family, especially by family. Heather stood speechless for a moment, then found her voice again. Richard is going to be furious. He'll probably sue you for that money. He can try, I replied calmly, but it was never promised to you or legally designated for your children. I never even told you about it. It was going to be a surprise gift. The reality of what she had lost, both the house sitter and the substantial college fund, finally seemed to sink in. Her expression cycled through anger, disbelief, and a brief flash of regret. This isn't over, she finally said, turning to leave. You're making a huge mistake. No, Heather, I called after her. The mistake was thinking I had to diminish myself to be worthy of your acceptance. She didn't look back as she stalked to her SUV and drove away. I returned to the shop where my co-workers had clearly overheard much of the confrontation. The receptionist gave me a thumbs up, and my client, a woman in her 40s, with several tattoos of her own, smiled sympathetically. Family drama, huh? She said as I resumed our consultation. Been there. Good for you for standing up for yourself. Throughout the rest of the day, I received a barrage of angry texts from Richard, threatening everything from legal action to telling the entire extended family what a terrible person I was. I blocked his number after the 5th message, no longer interested in his opinions or threats. That evening, my parents called. They lived in Florida now, having moved there after retirement, and Heather had apparently given them her version of events. Clara, though, my father began, your sister says you're refusing to house sit and that you stole money meant for the kids' education. What's going on? I took a deep breath and explained the whole situation from the beginning. The initial welcome, the growing tension over my tattoos, the ultimatum, and being kicked out with nowhere to go. I explained about the college fund I had been saving and my decision to use that money for myself after Heather's rejection. To my surprise, they didn't immediately take Heather's side. She kicked you out because of your tattoos, my mother asked, sounding genuinely shocked. That's ridiculous. You're her sister. She said I was a bad influence on the kids, I explained. That she didn't want them thinking tattoos were normal. There was a long pause on the line. We may not understand all your choices, my father finally said, but family is family. Heather was wrong to throw you out like that. Their support, however tentative, meant more than I could express. After we hung up, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Emma using a friend's phone. Aunt Clara, I miss you. Mom won't tell us why you really left. Are you okay? Can we still talk sometimes? I replied carefully, not wanting to put her in the middle of the conflict. I miss you too, Emma. I'm fine, just getting settled in my new place. Of course we can talk. Your mum and I have some disagreements, but that has nothing to do with how much I love you and your brothers. Later that evening, I learnt from Mia, who had heard through mutual friends, that Heather and Richard had cancelled their European vacation. They couldn't find a house sitter on short notice, and Richard wasn't comfortable leaving the house unattended for 3 weeks. It was petty, but I felt a small sense of satisfaction knowing that their plans had been disrupted. As for the money, I had already decided how to use it. A portion went towards securing my new apartment and replacing some of the belongings lost in the fire. Another portion I set aside for a tattoo apprenticeship program I had always wanted to pursue. An advanced course with a renowned artist that would elevate my skills to the next level. The rest I kept in savings, a safety net as I rebuilt my life. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based solely on what was best for me, not on maintaining a relationship with a sister who couldn't accept me for who I was. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. 6 months passed in what felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. I had settled into my new apartment in Chicago, a small but character-filled space in a more artistic neighborhood than Heather's suburban enclave. The advanced tattoo apprenticeship had transformed my work, adding new dimensions to my artistic voice and connecting me with influential artists in the industry. Using the remainder of the money I had reclaimed, I took a risk and opened a small studio space of my own. It wasn't large, just enough room for me and eventually one other artist, but it was mine. I named it Authentic Ink. a testament to the importance of staying true to oneself. The business grew steadily, attracting clients who appreciated my unique style and the welcoming, judgment-free atmosphere I cultivated. I found myself busier than I had been in Portland, with a waiting list stretching several weeks for new clients. I hadn't spoken to Heather since our confrontation at the tattoo shop. Richard had eventually stopped trying to contact me after his legal threats proved hollow. My parents had visited once, staying in a nearby hotel, and seemed genuinely impressed with what I had built. "You've really made something of yourself, Clara," my father had said, looking around my small but thriving studio. Coming from him, it was high praise indeed. One Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning up after my last client of the day, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up to see Emma standing hesitantly in the doorway. At 16 now, she looked older than the last time I'd seen her, more self-assured, despite her obvious nervousness. "Emma." I put down my cleaning supplies and rushed to hug her. "What are you doing here? Does your mum know where you are?" She returned the hug tightly before pulling back. I told her I was studying at the library with friends. "I've been saving my allowance to take an Uber here. I had to see you." I led her to the small sitting area where clients usually waited. "I'm so happy to see you, but I don't want to cause problems between you and your mum." "Mom's the one causing problems," Emma said, a hint of teenage defiance in her voice. "Things have been awful at home since you left. She told us you abandoned us because you didn't care about family, but I knew that wasn't true." Her words stung. "Of course that's not true. I love you and your brothers very much." "I know," Emma nodded. "Tyler and Jackson miss you too. Mum forbid us from contacting you, but we talk about you all the time when she's not around." "How are they doing?" I asked, hungry for news of my nephews. "Tyler's gotten really into photography. I think he's trying to find his own artistic outlet, since Mum's so weird about anything related to tattoos." Emma rolled her eyes in typical teenage fashion. "And Jackson still has that car you gave him. He keeps it hidden in his special treasure box, so Mum won't take it away." The thought of my gifts being confiscated made my heart ache, but I tried not to let it show. "And you? How are you doing?" Emma's expression grew more serious. "That's kind of why I came. Mum's gotten so controlling since you left. It's like she's afraid I'm going to turn into you or something. She monitors my art projects, checks my social media, even went through my room looking for drawings of tattoos." I frowned, concerned. "Has she always been this way?" "Not like this." Emma shook her head. "It's gotten worse. Dad just goes along with whatever she says. They had this huge fight after they cancelled the Europe trip. Mum blamed you, but Dad said they should never have expected you to house sit after kicking you out." This glimpse into the aftermath of our fallout was surprising. I hadn't expected Richard to show any understanding of my position. "Aunt Clara," Emma continued, "I need to know what really happened. Why did you leave so suddenly?" I weighed my words carefully. "Your mum and I have very different views on personal expression and choices. She was uncomfortable with my tattoos and worried about my influence on you kids. She asked me to leave." "Because of your tattoos?" Emma looked incredulous. "That's so stupid. Your tattoos are beautiful. They tell your story." "Thank you." I smiled, touched by her understanding. "But your mom has the right to decide what influences she wants in her home and around her children. I couldn't change who I am, and she couldn't accept it. Sometimes that happens even in families." "It's not fair," Emma insisted. "You're the only one who ever encouraged my art. Mom just wants me to focus on things that look good on college applications." "Your mom wants what she thinks is best for you," I said, trying to be fair despite everything. "She has a different vision of success than I do. But Emma, you don't have to choose between us. You can love your mum and still make your own choices when you're older." Emma seemed to consider this. "Can I still visit you sometimes? I won't tell Mom if you think that's better." I hesitated. Secretly meeting my niece behind my sister's back felt wrong, no matter how much I wanted to maintain our relationship. "How about this?" I suggested. "I'll reach out to your mom. Maybe after all this time we can find some middle ground. If she's okay with supervised visits, we can see each other properly without sneaking around." Emma looked doubtful. She's still really angry about the Europe trip, and she mentioned something about college money too. "There's a lot of history there," I acknowledged. "But I'm willing to try if she is. Family is complicated, Emma, but it's still important." Before Emma left, she showed me some of her recent artwork on her phone. Her talent had grown impressively in the months since I'd last seen her. I gave her a small sketchbook with professional-grade pencils as a gift. making her promise to use it regardless of what happened between her mother and me. After Emma's visit, I spent several days considering whether to reach out to Heather. Finally, I sent a simple text. Emma visited my shop. I think we should talk. Coffee sometime. 3 days passed before her reply came, Starbucks on Main, Thursday 10 a.m. When Thursday arrived, I dressed carefully. Long sleeves despite the warm weather, minimal makeup, my hair pulled back neatly. I wasn't hiding who I was, but I didn't want my appearance to be an immediate barrier to conversation. Heather was already at a corner table when I arrived, looking much the same as always. Perfectly styled hair, conservative clothing, impeccable makeup. She didn't smile when I sat down. Emma is grounded for lying about where she was going, she said without preamble. I didn't ask her to visit, I clarified immediately. And I suggested that any future visits should be with your knowledge and permission. Heather's expression softened slightly. That's reasonable of you. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled only by the ambient noise of the coffee shop. Finally I spoke. Heather, I'm not here to reopen old wounds, but the kids miss me and I miss them. Is there any way we can find some middle ground here? She studied me for a long moment. You took money that was meant for their education. I took back money that I had saved, intending it as a gift, I corrected gently. After being thrown out of your house for something as superficial as my appearance, I reconsidered that gift. Heather flinched slightly at my framing, but didn't argue the point. Richard wanted to sue you for it. But you didn't, I observed. Why? She looked down at her coffee. Dad talked him out of it, said it would just tear the family apart more. Another silence fell less tense than before. Your business seems to be doing well, Heather finally said. Emma wouldn't stop talking about your studio. It is, I nodded. I took the advanced apprenticeship I'd always wanted to do. It's opened a lot of doors. With the money for the kids, she couldn't help adding. With my money, I corrected again. But Heather, I didn't come here to argue about the past. I came to see if there's a path forward. She sighed, looking suddenly tired. What exactly are you proposing? Supervised visits with the kids, I suggested. Maybe once a month to start. In public places with your approval. No discussions of tattoos if that's still a concern for you. You'd do that? She asked, seeming genuinely surprised. Censor yourself around them. I'd respect your boundaries as their parent, I clarified. That doesn't mean I'll pretend to be someone I'm not, but I won't actively encourage anything you're uncomfortable with. Heather seemed to consider this. Richard won't like it. This isn't about Richard, I said firmly. This is about family, about Emma and Tyler and Jackson having a relationship with their aunt. You really hurt us, Clara, she said quietly. Not just the house sitting or the money, you cut us off completely. You kicked me out of your house because you were ashamed of me, I reminded her, keeping my voice even. That hurt too. Heather didn't immediately deny it, which surprised me. I wasn't ashamed, she finally said, though her tone lacked conviction. I was worried about your influence on the kids. Is it really so terrible if your children learn that people can look different and make different choices while still being worthy of respect and love? I asked. She didn't answer directly. Emma's been challenging everything lately. My authority, our family values the plans we've always had for her future. She says she wants to go to art school now. I couldn't help smiling slightly. She's talented. She is, Heather admitted. But that's not the point. The point is she's becoming rebellious, and it started when you stayed with us. She's 16, Heather. Testing boundaries is part of growing up. It's how she figures out who she is. And who I am is just an obstacle to that, Heather asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her perfect facade. No, I said gently. You're her mother, her foundation. But even the strongest foundations need to be flexible sometimes, or they crack under pressure. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving from tension to tentative understanding. We didn't resolve everything. There was too much hurt on both sides for that, but we established some basic parameters for moving forward. I would be allowed supervised visits with the kids once a month. In return, I would respect Heather's parenting decisions, even when I disagreed with them. As we were preparing to leave, Heather asked the question I could tell had been bothering her. Why did you really save that money for the kids if you were just going to take it back? Because I love them, I answered honestly. And because family supports family even when they make different choices. At least that's what I believed. Heather looked thoughtful. And now I believe that love and support have to be mutual to be meaningful, I said. I'm still figuring out what that looks like for us. We parted with an awkward half hug, neither fully embracing nor completely distant. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. After our meeting, I used the last of the reclaimed money to establish a small scholarship fund for young artists interested in tattoo apprenticeships. I named it the Authentic Expression Grant, a way of turning the painful experience into something positive for others who might face similar judgment for their artistic choices. Emma continued to visit my studio occasionally with Heather's reluctant permission. Over time, Tyler and Jackson joined her. Our relationship would never be what it was before, but we were building something new, something based on honesty rather than conformity. As for Heather and me, we maintained a cautious distance, connected primarily through the children. Perhaps someday we would find our way back to true sisterhood. Until then, I was focused on living authentically and creating beauty in my own way. The greatest gift that came from this painful experience was the freedom I found in setting boundaries. By standing up for myself and refusing to diminish who I was to please others, I discovered a sense of peace and self-acceptance that no external validation could provide. Would you have done what I did? Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and pleasing your family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to live authentically, whatever that means for you.